welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Renny.
And I'm Josh, and I am happy to say that this is our 8th anniversary of Literary Gladiators.
Way to go, Josh.
Yes.
You make this happen.
You were talking about Literary Gladiators when you were in my Shakespeare class. Because you invited me to something one time that was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I said I could come, and then I took a bedside of tutoring at the time, and I couldn't come.
I think that was
that Literary Gladiators?
That was the College Literature Club.
Oh, all right.
I formed Literary Gladiators during my first semester at Kane because I was so fascinated with the interactions in English classes. I was saying you have to have Charlie and Lily on a panel together talking about literature. I'd be the third person that leveled things out, and then we'd have somebody rotate in and out. We'd have different rotating guests. That was the original structure of the show, but it has since formed into something completely different. Now we're very interactive with the BookTube community too.
Yes, and we're going to be transforming again.
Yes, the restructure is already happening. We still have we have a few months more of new general discussions coming up. Today we are going to be going over my favorite Langston Hughes poem, and it's only fitting because we are in Black History Month. The poem that we are going to be discussing is Theme from English B. The discussion starter I have is this. In Theme for English B, the speaker's English instructor gives them an assignment to go home and release themselves onto a page through writing. This poem is an account of what this speaker, a black man, and likely Hughes, had to say. What is it that the speaker in this poem has to say to this instructor?
Well, for one, at the end of the poem, in the beginning, he just talks about having to write the poem, is that he says there'll be a difference and a sameness because he's black and the professor is white, so there'll be a difference in their perspective, but since they're from common humanity and they're in the same class, there will be things that also are the same.
Yeah, and he calls that American, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that that's the fact that America doesn't take on an image, but it takes on a belief and an idea that everybody has the opportunity to make something of themselves, regardless as to who they are and how they were born or where they were born. Because this is just the continuation of an influx of people from other countries coming here to make a name. It's such a powerful poem and how they use the college setting, which anybody that has gone to college and has made something of their experience would be able to hit home with them. There are some people that would relate to it more, especially if they are people of color. A portion of what Renny had mentioned regarding the fact that, and I quote, "I guess being colored doesn't make me not like the same things other folks like, who are other races. So will my page be colored that I write? Being me, it will not be white, but it will be a part of you, instructor. You are white, yet a part of me, as I am a part of you. That's American." He has the same background, he has the same interest and the same endeavors. And that's perfectly okay, and that's what he's saying, that even if they have different skin color, they're of a different race, they're still people that are entitled to opportunities and respect, admiration, love. Even if things may look the way that they do at the time, maybe just a little bit of understanding will make them better. Being where he is a step forward.
But I think it's interesting. He wrote this later in life as a young person. He wrote it long before the Civil Rights Act of '64, and when he was at Columbia, he was the only black man in his classes. I'm sure that was kind of influential.
And that is mentioned in the poem.
Yes, he does
that he is the only black person in his class. He says, yeah. To me, I think this is really about identity, right? It's like it's about the black man's search for identity in America. I think is what he's getting at and looking for.
I had a friend in college, a black woman, who we're still in touch because we're both on Facebook a little bit. I went to a women's college then called Beaver College. It's Arcadia University today, and it was just a women's college. Of course, it's now co-ed because that they want to have men who make more money leave will bequeaths for the college. They figured they had to have more men. It was a WASP college, really. It was white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. They have given up the Presbyterian support, but at the time it was a Presbyterian college and got about a third third of its support from the Presbyterian Church. So there were almost no Jews there, and there was one black girl who was on my hallway. She was certainly not typically black because both of her parents were doctors. I can remember in the spring, everybody would put on baby lotion and iodine and put aluminum on these shades and sit outside to get roasted. I mean, I never would, of course, but I would be in a hospital with blisters. But she walked by one bunch one time and she said, what people will do to get a little bit of color.
Oh, with the tans and everything.
Yeah.
Well, she was mocking them. I experienced this a little tiny bit because when I went to a jazz club in the East Village in the mid-60s called Slugs, it was black. At that time you didn't say black, but it was black. And almost all the performers were black, although not all of them. I saw a lot of the leftover big jazz people. I saw Blitke and Artie Shaw and some very, very big names. When we first went, my husband and I, we went with a black engineer before we felt we could just go on our own. And then after a while, since we went on our own, there was an occasional other white person that had wandered in there from someplace. I do understand exactly what most people who are not of the general population of the United States, that is still 70% white if you discount Hispanics. Hispanics were once counted as white until Bush the First changed the census and added Hispanic and Latino. Otherwise, Hispanic, because they descended of European peoples, were considered white also. That you can certainly be strange in your own country, in your own place.
Yes, because white people, so to speak, have an ethnic tie to a Western country, and most came here on their own volition. You know, those families did. So, for the black person, you know, their identity, and they've been kind of robbed of whatever identity that they had in the old country, so to speak, and are just kind of products of a very dark history here. It's got to be a hard thing to try to grapple with. I think that's what Hughes is getting at, and he's looking at, I think, personal relationships, right, as a source of identity there. Toward the end, where he's talking about how he is a part of the professor and the professor is a part of him. He's looking at a human being as kind of a collection of relationships.
And it's based off of the circumstance that he made the decision to go to college, and the instructor made the decision to teach a class. Their lives are going to intermingle, and it's going to be a matter of what the instructor makes of it and what the student makes of it. Given that Hughes or the speaker being in their position, it's part of circumstance that they take the assignment in a different direction in how the white students in the class are writing about what makes them unique. Hughes, being a black student, has to answer the question of what makes him no different from the rest of them.
I also think there is a kind of mock in here, and he might be thinking back on this because he didn't write this as a student. When I was first at Ocean County College, I filled in several times in the writing lab for hours. And when I was a temporary full-time professor in 2008 and 2009, I had to have more hours, and so I was definitely in the writing lab. Anyway, I can remember students come in, they would have this paper, big red F, no other comment. And I'd say, well, you know, what was the assignment? The assignment was to go home and write about world peace. Or the assignment was to go home and write about how we can change agriculture so people only eat vegetables, or how we can, really huge, broad, undefined kind of topics. I do exactly the opposite. This goes in this paragraph, this goes in this paragraph, this is what you're going to cite so that the students are not, gee, how can I predict world peace? And this assignment is something like this, just to go home and write.
Yeah.
You know, and this, I think that there's a little bit of a nudge that he has in there, that's what he was required to do. There's a little nasty bit in this end about, well, you're white and I'm black, and it's not the same thing.
How would you sum up what the tone of this poem is?
Well, I think the tone of the poem is fairly neutral. I don't think that he's trying to make any enormous racial statement here or ask for the signing of the Civil Rights Bill. There was a Civil Rights Bill in 1957 that Eisenhower sponsored. It actually is the bill that was passed in 1964 under Johnson. And all the usual suspects like JFK and Johnson and Al Gore's father all voted against it in 1957. I don't think he's proselytizing here. I think these are like private comments on how I am the way I am and how you might be the way you are.
Yeah. I would agree that it is somewhat neutral. There's a sense of modesty, but yet matter of fact in how he's conveying who he is.
Yeah, I think it's like more like a kind of just a stream of consciousness, like, you know, presented with this idea that just by writing something is going to express who I am.
Yes.
And I'm not fully sure who I am.
Right, yes.
So I think he's just kind of trying to think it through.
Do we have any final thoughts?
I think everybody should be introduced to Langston Hughes. I do the Negro Speaks of Rivers. He's a major poet of the United States. We didn't talk about the Harlem Renaissance, but he was part of the end of the Harlem Renaissance and very, very influential in jazz and culture in general.
Probably his most recognizable poem is Harlem. This is my favorite of his poetry. I also really admire his prose, and in particular, my favorite is Thank You, Ma'am. I would say my favorite writer from the Harlem Renaissance. And I agree 110% that more people should be introduced to Hughes and his writing, which I think is extraordinary.
Yes, it's a very impactful poem. We read another for this session, right, where we were recording several discussions at this session, and we read Sphere, right, which has a black character.
That'll be coming up in a few weeks.
Yes, I read this first, and then as I was reading Sphere, I kept thinking back on this poem, and I'm not sure why I bring that up, except to say it really influenced my thinking for a couple of days after reading it. So it's a powerful piece.
Which one? This?
This is a powerful poem. Yes.
It really wowed me as someone going for an English major. I was introduced to this in postmodernism because we did a unit on.
He's postmodern?
I could see why the postmodernists would be interested in it, because it does have so much to do with
identity and stream of consciousness as a form of art. If you're interested in reading this and everything else that Langston Hughes wrote as far as poetry is concerned, here is the collected poems of Langston Hughes. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this discussion. I want to thank everybody that especially helped support this channel for the last 8 years. To both of you for your kind words and your long-standing commitment to the show.
Yeah, it's been great. I love this. I love doing this, Josh. It's been a lot of fun over the past 8 years. I can't believe it's been 8 years.
It has been 8 years.
That means we've known each other longer than 8 years.
Yeah, we've known each other for
9 or 10.
11 when this comes out.
Oh, wow. How about that?
If you like what you see, please support us on our Patreon. For the money that we make will allow us to provide you, the viewer, with more content. For now, and as always, we encourage you to keep reading.
Hi, I'm Larry, and next time on Literary Gladiators, we're going to be talking about A Temple of the Holy Ghost, a short story by Flannery O'Connor. It'll be Josh, Renny, and I discussing this fine piece of American literature, and I hope that you can all tune in. And while you're at it, if you would be so kind, please check out our Patreon page, and if you would consider supporting us, we would be eternally grateful.